4 conclusions that I came to after so many times in radio. To me, these I think are universals. I'll tell you what they are right after this. Hey Buckaroos, welcome back to Musicom Academy. Today I'm going to tell you 4 things that I've sort of learned along the way. The last one in particular goes against a lot of programming thinking, but I really think, this happened to me so many times, and I've seen it so many times that I think the normal thinking sort of doesn't really fit with things that I've actually seen. From like a science project point of view, somebody's saying, well, this is going to happen, but when you actually do the project, it's like, well, no, that actually didn't happen. That sort of didn't work out the way you told me it was going to work out. So let's go through it. Number 1, this is pretty much a universal, and I would say this has held true for me for at least a decade now. All radio stations out in public look horrible. We go back to 15, 20 years when stations went out in public. They had these, sometimes they'd have like RVs and they're all painted up with big logos, and there's like a studio in the back and that type of stuff. And maybe because things are cheaper, they have like a little bit of a street team that it's giving away stuff. At least they're doing something, and it sort of looked okay. It wasn't that bad. But now, from all of the stations that I've seen lately, when I'm out, I go out to an auto show and you look and there's like, it's 8 radio stations all lined up, and they're horrible looking. They have one of those pop-up tents. There's a couple interns sitting there. Half the time, nobody even has a t-shirt with a logo on it. There's a logo on the tent and that's it. And they're just standing there. They're looking at their phone. They're talking to each other. They're ignoring the people walking by. You're not registering for any big prize. They're not handing out trinkets. It's brutal. Why would you do that? If you want to go out in public, I'm not saying don't do that, but you want to think like you're Apple or you're Microsoft or some other big company. If Apple was going to go out and, on the street and do something, what would they look like? If you can't look like that, don't do it. What somebody's, is counter to that is going to say, well, you want to go out and, do stuff out on the street, and you want to be in front of people because that's what gets you ratings. I can tell you over the years, because I paid attention to it. I paid attention to it a lot. I have seen an enormous amount of radio stations never, ever, ever go out in public. They never do anything in public, in front of people whatsoever, except they do lots of advertising on television and they do lots of advertising on billboards. They choose an image that they want to show to the public that in their mind they're comfortable with, they like. They've honed it down to exactly what they want to say, exactly how they want to look, and all of that stuff, and that's what they project. They don't project mediocrity. They just don't. Number 2, RDS. What's RDS? That's the radio data system. There's a couple systems like that, but basically it's, when you look down at a car radio, like say you get a brand new car and you look down and there's writing on the car, on the screen. And a lot of times, if you turn to a radio station, you'll see the title and artist start to scroll across the screen. That would be a good thing because that's pretty rare in this day and age. If you want to balance that against, say, Sirius XM, if you happen to be in North America where you can see that, Sirius XM on a screen in a new car radio, you're going to see the title, you're going to see the artist, you're going to see the logo of the channel, you're probably going to see what album it's from. You see all the information there, and it's clear as a bell, and it looks professional. I make a drive 2 or 3 times a year, every year from Toronto, Ontario, so Canada, to Orlando, Florida. So I'm traveling, across half of North America, okay? Down and back, button pushing, listening to a ton of radio stations. And in the car, I look over at the screen, and this is what almost always I would see. And then it'll rotate, and then this is what I'll see. Or, even worse, I'll see this. Now, a lot of stations will just use the system in a really minimalistic way. They'll put the call letters, so it might be www.98.7, and that'll just sit on the screen, or it'll rotate. So it'll be www, then 98.7, then www.98.7. You're really not taking advantage of the system that you have, but at least it doesn't look amateur. Here's something else that I've seen. I've encountered it a bunch of times, enough times that I'd actually included in this lesson. So it isn't like a one-off. This is like, I hear it a lot. I'm driving down to Florida and catch a radio station, and let's say it's a CHR radio station. It's like, oh, this is pretty cool, and you know, it's nice. And I'm looking at the name of the radio station. It's like, you know, that's funny. It's called the Gator. That's kind of an odd name for a top 40 CHR radio station, and they're not saying that on the air. They might be saying something like Power 96. And the first time I didn't think too much about it, but then, you know, when it kept sort of happening here and there, I started to go looking, and invariably this is what would happen. The Gator was a country radio station, and it switched format. Turned over to Power 96, and now it's a CHR, but nobody went to the RDS system to change it. So it's sort of like it was a restaurant, it was a burger chain before, and then it turned into a Japanese restaurant, and nobody changed the sign. It doesn't say, you know, Japanese teppanyaki, it still says burgers. That's sort of the equivalent. If you get somebody in a car and they, hey, this is a nice station, what is, oh, the Gator. Huh? Number 3, this is basically for GMs, but I know I'm talking to PDs right now, and if it comes up, you can, you know, maybe play this for them, and they go, oh, you know, hopefully it'll change their mind, or at least let them think about it. When I was a general manager, it sort of seemed to me that this was happening, and then I thought, oh, well, let me just track this. So I started to track it on a weekly and a monthly basis. And this is what it was. If you advertise on television or billboards, something where it's major, you're spending a decent amount of money. You know, you got a pretty large showing of, you know, maybe 250, 300, you know, GRPs on TV or on billboards. And let's just say, I'll just make this easy. Say you spend $900,000. Okay, I know that's a big number, but I'm thinking big city. Okay, so say you spend $900,000. What I found out, what usually happens is, in a typical month during that period, if I did not advertise, I would make a certain amount of money, typically year after year, and we'll call that X. If I spent $900,000 on advertising and really was pounding, the salespeople during that time will usually bring in about 1/3 to 25% more than they normally ever would. And it was kind of like universal. It would happen every single time. So if you spent $900, okay, on advertising, you can sort of count on that you'd get an extra $300,000 in sales coming back at you. And you go like, wow, that seems weird. Well, it actually doesn't. Think about it, you know, in normal terms, super normal terms, you are just advertising to the public, right? But you're also advertising to potential clients. Potential clients, they're wondering if, you know, what radio station should I buy, because a whole bunch of radio stations are coming at them. Hey, you should buy us. We're this. You should buy me. We're this. We're blah, 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 blah. They're sitting looking and going, wow, I see a lot of TV for that station. And now that station's, you know, sales rep just walked in. I'm going to pay attention to that person and that radio station, and therefore you get more money. It's advertising. Plain and simple, advertising works. Number 4, and this is going to cause a lot of controversy and probably a lot of pushback from other PDs and probably from some research companies too. And I just think that I've seen enough circumstances of this that for the most part, what I'm about to tell you, in the right situation, and if you do it correctly, this is the way it really is, not the way you think it is. The timing of when you add a song matters way less than what you add. What you add counts way more. Being really early doesn't really hurt you if you do it correctly. So let me give you a few stories. I first sort of noticed this, you know, when I was programming in Detroit, and across the river we would compete with a station WRIF, and Fred Jacobs was the PD, and Fred is a great PD, and you know, he would research that station, you know, to the hilt, and you know, it was an ABC O&O, you know, an American broadcast company. ABC network owned the radio station, lots of money. Super strong, super professional, and all that stuff. Couldn't say enough good things about it. It was a great radio station. So Fred is now going into being a consultant for classic rock, because that's when he started his consultancy up, and he's leaving, and they get a new PD. They name this guy who's the weekend blues announcer to be the PD, and I'm like, what? What, you know, and I'm programming, you know, in the market, you know, and I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh my God. What are they doing? Are they going to sell the station? Do they want to kind of tank it? I don't understand why they're doing this. It makes no sense to me, because I'm thinking this is going to be a train wreck happening. So because of that, I'm curious after the guy takes over, and I started listening more than I normally would to the radio station. Now, prior to that, you know, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, rock is not my main thing that I would listen to. I would come in and out, and I totally understood, you know, what Fred was doing. it would be okay for me, but I like CHR, and that's kind of what I was programming at the time. Okay. So I started listening to the radio station, and first week it's pretty much the same, and then little by little it starts to change. And because it's changing, I'm listening even more now because I'm curious as to how much this guy is going to tank this radio station. And instead of it, I'm going to try to put this in radio terms for you no matter where you are in the world. Instead of it being the station playing rock songs, but totally know it, expected, totally know it, expected, all the usual. Oh, there's one I don't know what that is. Know it. Oh, there's another one I don't know what it is. Know it. Instead of the station being like that, the station started to become more like this. Know it, expected, don't know this one. Expected, don't know this one. Expected, know it, don't know this one, don't know this one. Know it, don't know this one. It started to turn into that. And little by little, it probably ended up being 50-50 where I'm listening going, I have no idea what they're playing. Now, at this point, I'm listening to the radio station, and for me, I'm going, I like this radio station. I really like what they're playing. I would hear song after song that I have never heard before. And some of them I would actually even go back and look, because, I'm programming, so I could go back to the charts and stuff and look, and I'm going like, wow, this is like pretty new right out of the gate. Oh my God, it's barely been released. And this guy's, banging it, on this radio station. And so I'm going back and forth with a quandary of this makes no sense what he's doing, the new PD, but I really like the radio station. It really sounds really good to my ear. So the ratings come out, and I'm not sure what to expect. I'm assuming it's going to go down, but it goes up. And the next rating went up. And until I left the market, so that probably was maybe about a year and a half. And I think when the smoke sort of cleared, it was maybe a point and a half up, maybe even 2 share points beyond where he started, which to me was mind-boggling given what was going on, because it broke every rule that anybody has ever told me about programming a radio station. Okay, really unfamiliar radio station, but doing really, really well. But here's the kicker. I later found out that he was a musician, and he was in clubs, rock clubs, a whole bunch, either with the band or he's just hanging out with his friends. He was the target. He's right on the cutting edge of the entire audience that they're shooting for. When and obviously too, he had a really good ear for hit music in that format. So he's picking songs that he thinks, or maybe even knows from playing them in the club. I have no way of knowing that, but I'm kind of assuming he might be playing songs in the club and watching everybody gets up and dance and, and have fun and like, oh, I love that song, blah, blah, blah. But the rest of the world doesn't really know that song, but the audience that he's shooting for, they did. So hold that thought. Let me give you another story. I'm now retired. I'm out of radio, and I dabble with it here and there, when people ask me, but for the most part, I'm out of it. I'm in Florida, we're down there for the winter, and a new radio station goes on the air here in Toronto called Indie 88. It's an alternative radio station. And I'm curious now, and so when I get back, I want to listen to it. So I listen to it and go like, whoa, really? I really like this station. They play some pretty good music, pretty good songs. And I'm listening to it, and and again, to go back to the way I described the other one, it would be know it, yeah, don't know that song, don't know this song, yeah, don't know it, yeah, don't know it, yeah, don't know it. So roughly maybe 40% of the songs in every hour, I don't know what they are. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they're playing new songs that I don't know what they are. I'm over to my daughter-in-law's, and she is the target for that radio station, and she listened to that radio station when they launched. So I'm telling her about it. Hey, have you ever listened to Indie 88? It's a really good radio station. I really, really like it. They play some pretty good music. She goes, yeah, I used to listen to it, but I stopped listening. Why? Why'd you stop listening? Because I'm thinking like, wow, she's the target. She plays this music all the time, on Spotify or whatever when we're over at the house. So I know she likes alternative music. Why would she tune this thing out? And her answer was, all I play is old songs. What? All I play mostly is old songs. I know all the songs. Like a lot of the stuff that they play, almost everything they play, this stuff's been out for years, and I know it, for ages. And I'm going, wow. To me, half of what they played, or 40%, was brand new music because it was new to me. I had never heard those songs, but yet they were like recurrents, or they were gold songs that I'm totally unaware of. I like them, this is my point, I like them, I thought they were really good, and the station sounded good, but she pointed out that I'm not hearing a new song, I'm hearing an old song. I'm hearing a hit song in that format. Hit song, hit song, hit song from months ago or years ago, but I think it's out right now. Hold that thought. The third story is I'm programming in Montreal, and I'm used to the Canadian content rules, which is 30% at the time. 30% of the music played had to be a Canadian certified song, and I'll explain that in some other time because it doesn't really matter for this. So I'm used to Canadian rules, but the province of Quebec had one more rule thrown onto it that was new to me. In Quebec, in order to protect the French language radio stations, they made it so if you were an English language radio station, you could not play more than 50% hit music. Okay, so now you not only have the 30% CanCon that you got to do, you also have to keep track of 50% of your songs cannot be hit music. It's the only, province, and if you're in the US, it's picture like it's a state. In this state, you have this one extra rule. So I get there and it's like, wow, okay, this is going to be formidable. How do we get around this? And this kind of is an interesting story about strategy too, about thinking out of the box and just doing things, whatever it takes to win, okay? No matter how weird it may sound to you, or no matter how many rules it may break of your normal thinking. So it's like 50% has to be a non-hit. Now, the way they categorized a non-hit was, if a song got onto a major chart, so let's just say Billboard, or at the time R&R, if a song got released and it was number 50, it's not a hit. If it's number 42, it's not a hit. As soon as it hit number 40 or above, so 40 to 1, the government considered that a hit song. And once you had a hit song, you could only play it as 50% of your music. As long as it's 41 or 42 or 43 or nothing, that's a big one, nothing, you could play it as much as you want because it's a non-hit. The question then becomes, well, how do you get around this? How do you build a radio station with 50% non-hits? Like, that's a recipe for disaster. Stupid rule. But they wanted to help the French radio stations. And typically the English radio stations in that market, because they had 3 different ratings. It's all in the same period, but they would have a rating where they put out the English station rating. So here's the ratings for English, here's the ratings for French, and here's the ratings for both of them combined. And typically the English radio stations would be like right at the bottom because, 2/3 of the city is French, and 1/3 can speak English. So clearly you're going to do poorly if you're down at the bottom. So anyway, I'm sitting back and talking to a lot of the people at the station. It's like, well, what do you normally do about this? Well, we just we play 50% hits, and it's like, oh man, there's got to be a way around this. So this is what we decided to do, and it's going to fit in with the other 2 stories that I just told you about, because at this point I know about the first story, the one, about Riff in Detroit and how fast that guy was programming music. So I was like less leery to go down this path than I normally would have been. So I thought, all right, what's the definition of a non-hit? What do we have to work with? If it's an album track, it's a non-hit. If it's 41 and above, it's a non-hit. Okay, what makes it 41 and above? That's the next question. Well, in order to do that, you have to kind of start playing the song before it ever gets to 40. So you got to be lightning fast on releases. What else? Well, you're going to have to be able to come up with some sort of adjustment in rotations to be able to handle what that whole thing is when you're playing 50% hits and something becomes a hit. What are you going to do with it? Because that also encompasses gold. Like if you're playing a song that was a hit song from 4 years earlier, that's a hit song. So, like if you had a classic hit station, 50% would be the normal songs and the other 50 would be like, I don't know what you're playing. That's sort of the situation. So this is what we did. And when I took over the radio station, the station probably had, in English Montreal, because there's not a whole lot of stations there in English Montreal, I think the station had something like, I don't know, 7.5, 8 shares, somewhere in there. At the end, when I left, we had a 21 share. 21 share of the audience. And I believe we came up from like, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 ranked in the full Montreal with French stations included. I think we ended up being number 5 in the entire market. So we were catching a huge amount of French people listening to this too. So how do we do that? How do we get there with that weird rule, with 2 weird rules really? We decided to be incredibly picky on the music that we were playing, okay? If we were gonna add a song, it was a very simple criteria. You either believed that this song could make it to top 5 or it just didn't bother. Because you would literally be in meetings like, what do you think this can get to? Well, I don't know, it might get up to number 14, 15. I don't know, it's probably gonna be number 20. Well, a lot of stations are playing it. Yeah, you think it'll ever get to number 1? No shot. Okay, let's skip it. So we're being incredibly picky, only basically trying to look for home runs. The other thing was, when something would come out, there'd be like not a whole lot of debate. We'd listen to the music meetings and go, oh my God, this is a really great song. This thing could be a home run, add it now. Add it now when no other stations have added this song. So we're gonna get a good 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even 5-week run before it finally crosses over 40, and becomes number 35, and all of a sudden now it's a hit song and we gotta slow it down. The next thing that we did was, okay, well, if they're not released, they're never gonna be hits. So let's just say it's the new Lionel Richie album. Let's say that comes out and All Night Long is the release. That's the single. We'd look on the album and go, Penny Lover's on here, and say 2 other songs. We would go to Penny Lover and start playing that. We'd play All Night Long. As soon as that became a hit, we'd start adding in Penny Lover in a slow sort of rotation as a new song. So All Night Long is being played, as a hit song, and it's kind of coming up, but it's part of that 50% hits. Penny Lover now is not a hit. It's not a hit song, and we can play it. I didn't want to play it super fast, but we're playing it a pretty decent amount. And then we'd wait it out until that was released, and we still had even more time for that to climb the charts. So by the time that got up, and that became a hit, we have already played that song like a month and a half, maybe even 2 months. And to our audience, it's really familiar, and it's fine for us to slow it down for every other radio station in the market. They're just sort of adding now because they're going with the norm. They're doing things the normal way. The upside of all of that, when you do that long enough, there's a really different sound between our radio station and the other radio stations. If anybody's bouncing around, it's like, this radio station is interesting, they're sort of exciting. This one is like sort of boring because they're playing songs now and making believe they're new, or I heard it, I heard it a bunch already on this other radio station. This one, seems to play new stuff, this one doesn't. Kind of not that unlike the Indie 88 story I was telling you about, where to me, I'm hearing the song thinking it's new, and yet my daughter-in-law knows that it's old. She's bored with it, she left. The last thing that we did was we leaned into album cuts, but only if they made sense. We just didn't do it, just because they were album cuts. And usually we would do this on Canadian artists because it helped out with the CanCon, but it also just made us a cool radio station. A perfect example of that was when Jagged Little Pill came out, and Ironic was, the first release, and everybody's playing, Ironic, and we're playing Ironic, and it's like, this is a Canadian artist. This is a monster album. The album was selling like crazy. It was like smoking everywhere. Didn't matter the country. This is a smash platinum and then some album. Is there anything else on here that we can play? I don't really care if it gets released or not. So we went onto the album and started looking for stuff, and I can vividly remember playing the song Perfect, and it was a kind of a cool song. It's it's sort of a slow song. There's a neat story about just not fitting in and not being, the mother's, or I think it was the mother was driving the daughter nuts.
Sometimes it's never quite enough, and if you're flawless, then you're in my love. Don't forget to win first place. to keep that smile on your face.
Always pushing her to be perfect and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, great song. So we played that for like 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, not a lot, 3 or 4 weeks, but it's taking up the slot of a non-hit, and we get to talk about playing a cut from this monster album. You're writing the album, which made the station hip, made the station interesting, made the station seem like it was really on top of music, and it made us fast. Every other station started to seem boring and just basically sort of kind of weak. Again, 21 share. That shouldn't have happened by all normal radio dogma, radio logic, the things people tell you, but it did happen. And it's a story that I wanted to tell you about so that you bear it in mind if you get in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't want to add that song. Just ask yourself one simple question. Is this some song that I really believe is a home run? Do I believe it's a home run? Does my music director believe it's a home run? Does some other people on the staff? You might want to ask them. You know, I had 2 music directors at that radio station. Super rarity. I mean, even I was shocked when I got there. It's like, wow, there's 2 of them. And they both had exquisite taste. They had great taste in music. One person leaned toward rock and alternative, which I could lean on him for those type of songs. And the other person had a top, much like mine, a top 40 and an R&B ear. And I would lean on him for those type of songs. And all 3 of us pretty much agreed on most stuff. But, you know, if it was something I wasn't quite sure, like, say, in particular alternative, I'd lean for, you know, toward Henry, one of the guys, and go like, what do you think? If he said okay, it's like, I'm in. Okay, let's hit it. Okay, so ask some other people. If everybody's going home run, the time you add it doesn't really matter. What matters is, what is it and how good is it? I leave those with you. And we will pull out another lesson coming up next week. If you like these, subscribe. We've passed the 600 person mark, 600 PDs, which I found astounding. So I guess 700 next is the next goal. And again, I really hope that these are helping you. And if you have any questions, just send me a note. I get questions, all the time from different places, from Cairo, from Bolivia, from Mexico, from other places where somebody's dealing with something they don't really know that much about. I'm glad to help you. It's kind of like free consulting. I don't want to be your consultant, but answer a few questions, no problem. I'm totally good with that, especially because you're a viewer of the channel, and I really appreciate that. So until next week in the next lesson, see ya!